The champagne flutes clinked, the music swelled, and 200 faces blurred into a kaleidoscope of forced smiles. "I want to thank my mom for her late-life crisis," Hannah announced, her voice ringing through the ballroom. A ripple of laughter followed. My stomach lurched. "It's been entertaining," she continued, her eyes glittering with something that wasn't quite affection. Mark squeezed her hand, a tight, knowing smile on his face. My own champagne turned to acid in my throat. Really added some spice to the wedding planning. Hannah added, her gaze sweeping across the room, finally landing on me. I could feel the weight of those 200 gazes, the whispers, the barely concealed amusement. "Well, darling," I managed, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I always aim to please." My voice wavered slightly, though I'm sure you would have preferred a more traditional contribution. I lifted my glass in a mock toast, the crystal catching the light and momentarily blinding me. "To new beginnings," I said, the words tasting like ash. Hannah's smile tightened. "Indeed," she replied, her voice clipped. "To new beginnings." She turned back to the crowd, her attention already shifting, leaving me stranded in a sea of politely averted eyes. The band struck up a lively tune, and the guests, eager to escape the awkwardness, quickly dispersed back to their conversations and dancing. I stood there, frozen, the remnants of my smile cracking like thin ice. "Elaine, you all right?" A concerned voice broke through the fog. It was Aunt Susan, my late husband's sister, her hand resting gently on my arm. "Fine, Susan," I said, forcing another smile, just a bit overwhelmed. "It's a big day." "Nonsense," she said, her eyes full of understanding. "That girl needs a good talking to. Imagine embarrassing her own mother at her wedding." "Let it go, Susan," I murmured, shaking my head. "It's her day. I don't want to cause a scene." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'll just slip out for some fresh air." I excused myself and made my way to the terrace. The cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. The city lights twinkled below, a vast indifferent expanse. I leaned against the railing, the smooth stone cold against my skin. The humiliation burned in my chest, a tight knot of anger and disbelief. How could my own daughter, the child I raised and nurtured, treat me with such casual cruelty? Hannah's words echoed in my mind. Late life crisis. It was true. I had quit my job at the bank a few months prior, feeling stifled and unfulfilled. I wanted to start my own business, something that truly resonated with me. But to Hannah, it was nothing more than a joke, a source of amusement for her and her friends. She saw it as a sign of weakness, a pathetic attempt to recapture my youth, and Mark, ever the dutiful fiancé, had echoed her sentiments, dismissing my ambitions with a condescending pat on the head. "You'll find something else, Elaine," he'd said, his tone dripping with false reassurance. "Something more age-appropriate." The memory stung, a fresh wave of anger washing over me. Age-appropriate, as if my age somehow diminished my worth, my capabilities, as if my dreams were somehow less valid than theirs. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. The city lights blurred through my tears. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, a feeling of being adrift in a world that no longer seemed to have a place for me. But even in the depths of my despair, a flicker of something else began to ignite. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was something harder, colder, more resolute. It was a quiet determination, a promise I made to myself in the stillness of that night, under the indifferent gaze of the city lights. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let their dismissive words and condescending smiles define me. I would prove them wrong. I would show them what a late-life crisis could really achieve. I would build something extraordinary, something that would make them regret every single word, every single smirk. And when I did, they wouldn't even see it coming. Rain lashed against the window of my small Chicago apartment, mirroring the storm inside me. Hannah's wedding, supposed to be a joyous occasion, echoed in my mind, not with laughter and celebration, but with the sting of her cruel words. Mom's little late-life crisis, she'd sneered, dismissing my attempts to reignite my career as some kind of joke. It's become a bit of a punchline, hasn't it? The unemployment checks barely covered the rent, and the silence of the apartment was deafening. I'd spent my life building a stable home for Hannah, sacrificing my own ambitions, only to be discarded like yesterday's news. I stared at the peeling paint on the wall, a stark reminder of how far I'd fallen. Worthless, I muttered, the word catching in my throat. The floral arrangement I'd so carefully chosen for Hannah's wedding, now withered and brown on my kitchen table, seemed to mock me. You should have just stayed quiet, I told my reflection in the darkened window, seeing the exhaustion etched on my face. The phone rang, startling me. It was Carol, a former colleague. "Elaine, how are you doing?" she asked, her voice laced with a pity I couldn't bear. "Fine, Carol," I lied, forcing a cheerful tone. "Just catching up on some reading." "Oh," she said, the hesitation palpable. "Listen, there's a position opening up at the firm. Junior analyst. I know it's not quite your level." My stomach clenched. "Thanks, Carol," I managed, "but I think I'm going to explore other options." I hung up before she could offer any more condescending sympathies. Other options? What other options? I was 60 years old, unemployed, and apparently a laughingstock. I sank onto the worn sofa, the springs groaning beneath me. The television flickered, showcasing another impossibly perfect family, their smiles radiating an effortless happiness that felt a million miles away. I reached for the remote, then stopped. Why bother? What was the point of distracting myself from a reality I couldn't escape? A wave of self-pity washed over me. I closed my eyes, letting the tears I'd held back for weeks finally flow. I cried for the career I'd abandoned, for the daughter I thought I knew, for the life I thought I'd have. How had it come to this? I'd always prided myself on my independence, my financial acumen. I'd managed household finances with laser precision, juggling budgets and investments, ensuring Hannah had everything she needed. And Mark, with his condescending remarks about my quaint understanding of the market. "Elaine, you wouldn't understand the complexities of modern finance," he'd said once, a smirk playing on his lips. "Stick to balancing the checkbook." He probably thought I was some kind of financial dinosaur, stuck in the past. But a flicker of something else ignited within the despair, a spark of defiance. Mark's words, Hannah's laughter, the pity in Carol's voice, they echoed in my mind, no longer as insults, but as fuel. I wiped my tears, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. They think they've written me off, I whispered, my voice shaking with anger. They think I'm finished. I stood up, the worn springs of the sofa protesting under my weight. I walked over to the window, the rain still falling, but now it seemed less like a reflection of my despair and more like a cleansing. They have no idea what I'm capable of, I said, a small, determined smile playing on my lips. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I used to use for household budgeting, and opened it. The familiar glow of the screen felt strangely comforting. It was time to stop wallowing and start strategizing. Time to remind everyone, especially Hannah and Mark, that I wasn't a punchline. I was Elaine Morgan, and I was just getting started. I opened a new document, my fingers hovering over the keys. Morgan Strategies, I typed, the words bold and clear against the blank page. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, blurring the already gray November sky. Hannah's words, Mom's little career change is just the punchline to all our wedding jokes, echoed in the emptiness of the small apartment. I stared at the peeling paint on the window frame, a stark reflection of how I felt chipped away at, worn down. Unemployment checks barely covered the rent, let alone the shame. Another rejection, I muttered to myself, picking up the crumpled letter from the table. Not qualified, it read, the words a fresh sting on an already festering wound. I let it fall back onto the pile of similar dismissals, a paper monument to my apparent worthlessness. My phone buzzed, a text from Hannah. Mark and I landed that account with Peterson Industries, celebrating tonight. You should go out, Mom. Maybe find a hobby. I swallowed the lump in my throat. A hobby, right. Like macrame or competitive staring contests. Something befitting a washed-up, 60-year-old husband. I pushed the phone away, the screen flashing mockingly. Hannah wouldn't understand. She and Mark, with their perfectly coordinated lives, their matching ambition. They saw my attempts to find fulfilling work as a midlife crisis, a joke to be shared at cocktail parties. They think I'm finished, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. They think I'm done. I stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back with a harsh scrape. The sudden noise startled me, a burst of unexpected energy in the oppressive silence. I went to the cupboard and pulled out a chip mug, the one Hannah had made for me in elementary school, ironically proclaiming world's best mom. The irony wasn't lost on me. World's best mom, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. More like world's biggest disappointment. I filled the mug with lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste mirroring my mood. As I sipped the coffee, my gaze drifted to the stack of notebooks on the corner of the table. Notebooks filled with scribbled notes, ideas, projections, market analyses, ideas I'd been playing with for years, ideas for my own consulting business, ideas that had been dismissed by potential employers as too ambitious, too risky, too much. I ran my hand over the worn covers, a flicker of defiance igniting in my chest. Too much, I said aloud, the words sharper this time. Maybe they're just not enough. An idea began to form, a seed of resolve taking root in the barren landscape of my despair. I pulled a fresh notebook from the stack, its pages crisp and white, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. I picked up a pen, the smooth plastic cool against my fingers. "Let's see what too much looks like, shall we?" I murmured, a small smile playing on my lips. I started sketching, drawing diagrams, jotting down notes. My hand moved quickly, driven by a newfound energy, a quiet determination that had been dormant for far too long. I began with the basics, outlining the framework for Morgan Strategies, a consulting firm specializing in helping small businesses navigate complex financial landscapes. I envision a lean, agile operation, leveraging my years of experience in corporate finance to provide tailored solutions for clients who were often overlooked by the larger firms. I sketched out potential service offerings, target demographics, marketing strategies. I pored over my old notes, refining ideas, discarding those that no longer felt relevant, expanding on those that sparked a renewed sense of excitement. The rain continued to fall, a steady drumming against the window pane, a soothing backdrop to the flurry of activity unfolding within the small kitchen. Hours passed, marked only by the emptying coffee mug and the growing stack of papers filled with my scrolled plans. As the day faded into evening, a sense of purpose began to replace the gnawing emptiness I had felt earlier. The rejection letters, Hannah's dismissive text, the peeling paint on the window frame, they all faded into the background, replaced by the vibrant vision taking shape on the pages in front of me. I envisioned a sleek office space, a team of dedicated professionals, a portfolio of successful clients. I saw myself not as the washed-up has-been Hannah and Mark perceived me to be, but as a confident, successful businesswoman, the architect of my own destiny. Morgan Strategies, I said aloud, the name resonating with a newfound power. It wasn't just a business plan. It was a statement, a declaration of independence, a testament to my resilience. I looked at the clock, surprised to see how late it was. I had worked straight through dinner, fueled by a passion I hadn't realized I still possessed. My phone buzzed again, another text from Hannah. "Dinner at the club tonight. Peterson Industries loved Mark's presentation. Big things happening." I closed the notebook, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling within me. Big things are happening here too. "Hannah," I whispered, a small smile playing on my lips. Big things indeed. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moonlight peeked through the clouds. I looked out at the quiet street below, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The peeling paint on the window frame suddenly didn't seem so bleak anymore. It was a reminder of where I had been, a stark contrast to the bright future I was determined to build. I picked up my phone and typed a quick reply to Hannah. "Glad to hear it, sweetheart. Busy tonight. Talk soon." I put the phone down, the faint glow of the screen illuminating the notebook on the table. Inside its pages, a revolution was brewing, a quiet, calculated revolution that would change everything. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should have. Inside were the last of my belongings from the office I'd shared with Martha. "It's such a shame, Elaine," Martha had said, her voice thick with sympathy. "You deserve better." I managed a weak smile. "These things happen," I replied, but the words felt hollow. Hannah's words, spoken so carelessly at her wedding, echoed in my head. "Mom's little career change is more of a late-life crisis, isn't it, Mark?" Mark had chuckled, a condescending pat on my shoulder. Let's hope it doesn't last too long, he'd added, and the guests around us had joined in the laughter. Now, a year later, here I was, unemployed and humiliated, packing up the remnants of a career I'd poured my heart into. I lugged the box to my car, the midday sun beating down on me. The heat seemed to amplify the tightness in my chest. As I drove home, a familiar wave of self-pity washed over me. Was this it? Was I destined to become the punchline of my own family's jokes? Stopping at a red light, I noticed a small, empty storefront tucked between a bustling bakery and a dry cleaner. A for-lease sign hung crookedly in the window. An idea, small and fragile, began to take root. Maybe this isn't the end, I muttered to myself. Maybe it's a beginning. The following weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings with landlords, and late nights poring over business plans. I named my new venture Morgan Strategies, a simple, no-nonsense title that reflected the approach I planned to take. I'd spent years advising businesses on their finances. Now, it was time to put my own expertise to the test. My initial capital was limited, a combination of my savings and a small business loan. It's a gamble, my friend Sarah warned me over coffee. Are you sure about this, Elaine? I have to be, I replied, a newfound steel in my voice. I have nothing left to lose. I started small, offering financial consulting services to local businesses. The first few clients were acquired through word of mouth, referrals from old colleagues and acquaintances who still believed in me. Elaine, you're a lifesaver, Mr. Henderson, the owner of a struggling bookstore, told me after I helped him restructure his debt. I don't know what I would have done without you. His words were a balm to my wounded pride. They were a validation, a reminder that I still had value, that I wasn't the washed-up failure Hannah and Mark had made me out to be. Slowly but surely, Morgan Strategies began to grow. I hired a young, energetic assistant named David, who handled the administrative tasks, freeing me up to focus on strategy and client acquisition. You're building something special here, Mrs. Morgan, David said one afternoon, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. I can feel it. His words resonated with me. I was building something, not just a business, but a new life, a life free from the shadow of Hannah's judgment. I expanded my services, offering not just consulting, but also investment management. I started small, cautiously investing in local businesses I believed in. My instincts, honed over years of experience, proved to be sharp. The investments paid off, generating healthy returns for both my clients and myself. You have a real knack for this, Elaine. One client, a successful restaurateur, told me you should think about expanding. His words planted a seed. Expand. The idea had been swirling in the back of my mind for months. The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. A small but promising tech startup approached me, seeking investment and strategic guidance. I recognized the potential in their innovative software, and after careful consideration, decided to take the plunge. This is a big step, Mrs. Morgan, David cautioned. Are you sure you're ready for this? I'm more ready than you know, I replied, a quiet confidence radiating through me. The tech startup's success was meteoric. Within a year, Their software was being used by companies across the country. My initial investment multiplied tenfold, catapulting Morgan Strategies into a new league. I began acquiring smaller companies, strategically expanding my portfolio, and building a multi-million-dollar empire. I worked tirelessly, fueled by a quiet determination to prove, not to Hannah or Mark, but to myself, that I was capable of so much more than they had ever imagined. The sting of their humiliation was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was no longer the driving force. Now, my motivation was different. It was about building something lasting, something meaningful, something that was entirely my own. The year that followed Hannah's wedding transformed me. The quiet, unassuming Elaine Morgan, the woman who had allowed herself to be defined by her family's perception of her, was gone. In her place stood a confident, successful businesswoman, a woman who had built an empire from the ashes of her humiliation. I hadn't told Hannah or Mark about my success. I hadn't needed to. The time for a grand reveal, for a dramatic confrontation, hadn't arrived yet. But I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that it would, and when it did, it would be on my terms. The thought, a small, secret smile, played on my lips as I locked up my new office, a spacious suite overlooking the city. The cardboard box, a symbol of my lowest point, was long gone. Rain lashed against the windows of Hannah and Mark's condo, blurring the city lights below. "Mom, are you even listening?" Hannah sighed, twirling a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair. "I'm telling you, this organic baby food company is going to be huge." I managed a weak smile, stirring my pasta. "That sounds interesting, dear. Interesting. It's revolutionary," Mark chimed in, reaching across the table to pat Hannah's hand. "Your mother just doesn't understand the business world. Sweetheart." He flashed me a condescending smile. "Not like us." This was a familiar refrain. Every Tuesday, rain or shine, I'd endure their family dinner, a weekly ritual of thinly veiled insults disguised as casual conversation. My little consulting projects, as they called them, were always met with the same dismissive air. "It's more than a hobby, Mark," I said quietly, pushing a forkful of pasta round my plate. The words felt hollow even to me. "I'm actually working with some quite promising startups." "Oh, I'm sure," Hannah said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Like that, what was it called? Elderly Esports Coaching." She burst into laughter, and Mark joined in, their combined mirth echoing through the sterile, modern space of their apartment. I felt my cheeks flush, the familiar sting of humiliation rising in my chest. That project had actually shown some early promise before funding fell through. It wasn't the failure that stung. It was their relentless mockery, their refusal to see me as anything more than a slightly pathetic, aging woman grasping at relevance. Later, as I washed the dishes, another unspoken expectation, I stared out at the city lights, now shimmering through the rain-streaked glass. Hannah and Mark were engrossed in a discussion about their upcoming ski trip to Aspen, their voices a low murmur in the background. Each casual mention of luxury hotels and Michelin-starred restaurants felt like another tiny jab, a reminder of the life I no longer had, the life they believed I could never have. But something had shifted inside me during those long, lonely evenings after Hannah's wedding. The humiliation, The gnawing feeling of worthlessness had slowly morphed into something else, a quiet resolve. I had spent my career navigating the complex world of finance, building successful companies from the ground up. I knew what I was capable of, and I knew deep down that I wasn't done yet. The next few months blurred into a routine of late nights and early mornings. I poured all my energy into Morgan Strategies, my newly formed consulting firm. The name, a deliberate choice, a quiet assertion of my own identity. The dismissive comments from Hannah and Mark became white noise, fuel for the fire burning within me. I worked with a fierce focus, leveraging my years of experience and industry connections. I secured contracts with promising tech companies, guided them through complex financial landscapes, and watched them flourish. My small, unassuming home office became a command center, the hub of a growing empire. One Tuesday, I arrived at Hannah and Mark's condo to find them unusually subdued. Mark's bonus got deferred, Hannah mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Just a temporary setback, Mark added quickly, his usual bravado noticeably absent. They barely touched their food, their conversation stilted and strained. For the first time, I detected a flicker of vulnerability beneath their polished facade. I listened patiently, offering words of support, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. Their financial woes, once a source of amusement and superiority, now seemed insignificant. The scale of my own success, still hidden from them, dwarfed their petty concerns. As I left their apartment that night, the rain had stopped. The city lights shone with a newfound clarity, a vibrant tapestry stretching out before me. I hailed a cab, sinking into the plush leather seats. "Morgan Strategies, please," I said to the driver, a small smile playing on my lips. He nodded, pulling away from the curb and into the flow of traffic. I glanced back at Hannah and Mark's condo, a small, dimly lit square in the vast expanse of the city. They had no idea of the empire I had built, the power I now wielded, no idea that their casual dismissals, their condescending remarks, had inadvertently paved the way for my ultimate triumph. And the best part, they wouldn't find out for quite some time. The upcoming holidays promised to be interesting. The silence of my apartment was a stark contrast to the echoes of Hannah's wedding toast, where she'd called my attempts at reinventing myself a midlife meltdown. I could still feel the sting of her words, the amused glances of Mark and the wedding guests. But that silence, that emptiness, became my fuel. I poured all my energy, all my hurt, into something constructive. My old career in finance, the one Hannah and Mark seemed to think was so pathetically outdated, became the foundation of something new. I started small, consulting for local businesses, helping them navigate the choppy waters of investment. I called it Morgan Strategies, a quiet nod to myself, a reminder of who I was beyond the embarrassing mother label Hannah had so casually slapped on me. "Elaine, you're a lifesaver, Mr. Henderson," the owner of a struggling bakery said, gripping my hand. I thought I was going to have to close shop. His gratitude, his genuine relief, was a balm to my wounded pride. It was a validation I craved more than I'd realized. "Don't mention it," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. "I'm just glad I could help." The success with the bakery led to another client, and then another. Word of mouth spread faster than I could have imagined. I heard you worked miracles with Henderson's Bakery, a woman named Sarah, who owned a small chain of clothing boutiques, said over the phone. Could you take a look at my books? Of course, I replied, already feeling the familiar thrill of a new challenge. I worked long hours, poring over spreadsheets, analyzing market trends, and crafting strategies. The apartment, once a symbol of my loneliness, became my command center. My dining table, covered in documents and financial reports, was my battlefield, and I was winning. Elaine, you've doubled my profits in just 6 months, Sarah exclaimed during a celebratory dinner. I can't thank you enough. Her words were music to my ears. It wasn't just about the money, though the growing balance in my bank account certainly felt good. It was about proving to myself, and maybe, just maybe, to Hannah and Mark, that I wasn't washed up, that I was capable of so much more than they thought. You deserve all the credit, Sarah. You have a great business model, I said, raising my glass to her. But inside, a different kind of celebration was brewing. I was building something significant, something powerful, and I was doing it on my own terms. One evening, while reviewing a portfolio, a particularly interesting opportunity caught my eye. A small tech company developing innovative software for the healthcare industry was looking for investors. Their projections were impressive, their potential enormous. This could be big, I murmured to myself, a flicker of excitement in my eyes. I spent the next few weeks researching the company, meeting with their team, poring over their financials. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that this was an investment worth making. I'm in, I told the CA, extending my hand. I believe in your vision. He grasped my hand firmly, a grateful smile spreading across his face. Thank you, Ms. Morgan. We won't let you down. I wasn't just investing, I was acquiring. Slowly, strategically, I began acquiring other companies, businesses that aligned with my vision, businesses that had potential for significant growth. Morgan Strategies wasn't just a consulting firm anymore. It was becoming an empire. Late one night, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, I finalized the acquisition of a regional logistics company. This was a key piece of the puzzle, a strategic move that would streamline the operations of my other holdings. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but exhilarated. I had built something substantial, something that even Hannah and Mark, with their narrow-minded view of success, couldn't ignore. I looked around my apartment, no longer a symbol of my solitude, but a testament to my resilience. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the quiet hum of success, the unspoken promise of what was to come. I hadn't just rebuilt my life, I had redefined it. And the best part, Hannah and Mark had no idea. Their ignorance was my bliss, my secret weapon. Soon, very soon, they would learn just how much their mother, their midlife meltdown joke, was truly worth. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. The game, I realized, was just beginning. The phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. It was my lawyer. Elaine, he said, his voice hushed with excitement. The deal is done. You now own controlling interest in Peterson Industries. Peterson Industries. one of the largest manufacturing companies in the state. I took a deep breath, a slow smile spreading across my face. Excellent, I replied, my voice calm and steady. Excellent. I hung up the phone, the weight of my success settling upon me like a luxurious cloak. This was more than just revenge. It was a rebirth. And Hannah and Mark, they were about to get a front row seat to the show. The ornate lobby of the Drake Hotel, outside Chicago, buzzed with pre-wedding activity. Hannah, radiating bridal glow, intercepted me near a towering floral arrangement. "Mom," she began, her voice tight, "I need to ask you something. Please don't talk about your work at the wedding." I blinked, momentarily stunned. "Work," I echoed. "Hannah, what do you mean?" She shifted her weight, her smile strained. "Mark's family will be here, important people. And well, your little consulting just doesn't fit the image." My chest tightened. Little consulting. That's what she called Morgan Strategies, the firm I'd built from the ground up, the empire I'd painstakingly crafted after she'd dismissed my ambitions as a midlife crisis at her engagement party. "Image?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "What image are we trying to project?" "Exactly," Hannah sighed, a practiced gesture of exasperation. "Success, Mom, stability, the kind of life Mark and I are building. Your unconventional pursuits just complicate things." Unconventional. The word stung, a sharp echo of her earlier dismissal. "So I should pretend I don't have a career?" I asked, a faint edge creeping into my voice. "That I haven't spent the last 2 years building something substantial?" Hannah adjusted the diamond pendant nestled at her throat. "A gift from Mark. It's just for today, Mom," she pleaded. "Just keep it simple. Small talk. Weather. Anything but business." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Please, for me." I looked at her, really looked at her, the elaborate lace of her gown, the perfectly coiffed hair, the meticulously applied makeup, all the trappings of the life she so desperately wanted to showcase. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice soft. "Wouldn't dream of stealing your thunder." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Thank you," she breathed, squeezing my hand. "You're the best." She floated away, rejoining the throng of well-wishers, leaving me standing alone amidst the opulent decor. The best, right. The best at being invisible, apparently. I retreated to a quiet corner of the lobby, the plush velvet armchair welcome respite from the forced gaiety. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the latest market reports, the familiar numbers and graphs a soothing balm against the sting of Hannah's words. Morgan Strategies had just closed another acquisition, a significant one. It was a deal that had kept me burning the midnight oil for months, a deal that solidified my position in the industry, a deal that Hannah, in her blissful ignorance, deemed unconventional. A waiter passed by with a silver tray laden with champagne flutes. I accepted one, the cool bubbles a welcome distraction. I took a sip, letting the effervescence tickle my throat. Unconventional, yes, perhaps, but unconventional was also proving to be quite profitable. I thought about the portfolio I'd meticulously built, the network of contacts I'd cultivated, the quiet power I'd amassed. Hannah wanted stability, an image of success. She had no idea the true extent of the success I'd achieved, the empire I'd quietly constructed while she was preoccupied with wedding plans and seating charts. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted me to be silent, to fade into the background, to not disrupt the carefully curated narrative of her perfect life. And I would. For now, I would play the role of the doting, slightly embarrassing mother, the one with the little consulting gig. I would smile and make small talk and discuss the weather, just as she'd requested. I would let her bask in the spotlight, surrounded by her important people. But the silence wouldn't last forever. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing the truth, in holding the cards close to my chest. Hannah wanted a picture-perfect wedding, a flawless start to her new life, and I would give it to her. I would let her believe she had everything under control, that her world was perfectly ordered, precisely as she'd envisioned it. For now, but the world had a funny way of shifting, of rearranging itself in unexpected ways. And when it did, when the carefully constructed parade began to crack, I would be there, not as the dismissed mother, the unconventional embarrassment, but as something else entirely, something much, much more. The champagne bubbles danced on my tongue, a subtle foretaste of the celebrations to come. Celebrations that would be entirely my own. The music started up, signaling the beginning of the ceremony. I took another sip of champagne, the cool liquid a comforting weight in my hand. Time to put on the mask, to play the part. Time to let Hannah have her moment. But as I walked towards the ballroom, a quiet resolve settled within me. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning, and I had a feeling the next chapter was going to be very, very interesting. The doors to the ballroom opened, revealing the expectant faces of the guests. Hannah was nowhere to be seen yet. The hush that fell over the room was palpable. The wedding march began, soft and melodic. And in that moment, amidst the expectant silence, I knew this was just the intermission. The real show was yet to begin. The champagne flute felt slick in my hand, the bubbles a mocking echo of the hollow feeling in my chest. Honestly, Elaine, Hannah's maid of honor, Sarah drawled, leaning in conspiratorially, Morgan's strategies. It sounds like something you'd dream up after one too many cosmos. A ripple of laughter went through the small group gathered round the elegantly decorated table. My daughter, Hannah, radiant in her wedding gown, joined in, her eyes sparkling not with joy, I realized, but with a cruel amusement. Mom, really? You're going to be a business tycoon now? What's next? A reality show, Mark? My new son-in-law chuckled, patting her hand condescendingly. Let her have her fun, darling. It's just a phase. I forced a smile, the plastic curve feeling alien on my face. It's not a phase, Mark. It's my future. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Inside, though, a cold fire burned. I'd spent the last year rebuilding my life, brick by painful brick, after they'd dismissed my career aspiration as a midlife crisis. Hannah's wedding, the very event where I'd been so publicly humiliated, had become my catalyst. Besides, I continued, taking a sip of champagne, letting the cool liquid soothe my throat. Who knows? Maybe Morgan Strategies will be sponsoring your next anniversary party. Sarah scoffed. Honey, you haven't even secured your first client. Don't get ahead of yourself. Hannah nodded, her perfect smile unwavering. Mom, we appreciate the thought, but I think we'll be just fine." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "You'll never be on our level." I excused myself, the weight of their derision pressing down on me like a physical burden. I wandered towards the French doors that led to the sprawling balcony overlooking the manicured gardens. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of anger and hurt. They think I'm a joke, I thought. The realization a sharp pang in my chest. They think I'm nothing. But I knew better. I opened my eyes, the city lights twinkling in the distance like a constellation of possibilities. They didn't know the real Morgan strategies. They didn't know the countless hours I'd poured into building it, the sacrifices I'd made, the sleepless nights fueled by their dismissive laughter. They saw a fantasy, a whimsical pursuit of a woman they deemed irrelevant. They didn't see the acquisitions, the strategic partnerships, the growing network of influence I'd carefully cultivated. They didn't see the millions flowing into my accounts, the power quietly consolidating in my hands. They saw Elaine Morgan, the aging mother with a cute little hobby. They didn't see Elaine Morgan, CEO of a burgeoning empire. A waiter approached, offering a tray of hors d'oeuvres. I selected a miniature quiche, my mind racing. I had to be careful. My plan hinged on them remaining oblivious. I needed them to continue underestimating me, to bask in their perceived superiority. Their arrogance was my greatest weapon. I returned to the reception, pasting a serene smile on my face. Hannah was holding court, surrounded by her adoring friends, regaling them with anecdotes about her whirlwind romance with Mark. I caught snippets of their conversation, extravagant honeymoon plans, a new house in the most exclusive neighborhood, designer everything. It was all so predictable. I approached them, my heart beating a steady rhythm against my ribs. "Hannah, darling," I said, my voice dripping with feigned concern. "I overheard you talking about the house. Are you sure you can afford it? That neighborhood is notoriously expensive." Hannah rolled her eyes. "Mom, please. Mark's doing incredibly well. We have it covered." Mark puffed out his chest, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Don't worry, Elaine. We're not exactly struggling." He emphasized the struggling, a clear dig at my perceived financial instability. I placed a hand on Hannah's arm, my touch light but deliberate. "I just want what's best for you, sweetheart. It's a big commitment, a mortgage. Just be careful." Hannah shrugged me off, her smile tightening. "We know what we're doing, Mom." I retreated, my eyes scanning the room. The caterers were setting up the dessert table, a towering masterpiece of sugar and cream. I spotted the wedding planner, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard, and excused myself to speak with her. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her. I wanted to confirm the final payment for the venue. The planner looked up, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Morgan. Everything is in order. The final invoice was settled this morning." "Excellent," I replied, a subtle smile playing on my lips. "I just wanted to make absolutely sure. You know how these things can be." I handed her a discreet envelope. "A little something for your trouble." The planner's eyes widened as she peeked inside. "Oh, Mrs. Morgan, this is too much." "Nonsense," I said, waving my hand dismissively. Consider it a token of my appreciation for your hard work. You've made this day truly special. I returned to my table feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. The seed was planted. They didn't know it yet, but the very ground beneath their feet was shifting. Their carefully constructed world of privilege and pretense was about to crumble, and I, the woman they dismissed as a joke, held the detonator. The wedding was a beautiful affair, a testament to their perceived success. But I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that the real celebration was yet to come. The irony was exquisite. They were celebrating a future built on sand, while I, the supposed failure, was building an empire. And soon, very soon, they would learn the true meaning of Morgan's strategies. The champagne flutes clinked around me, a hollow, echoing sound in the opulent hallway of the grand ballroom. Mark, Hannah's husband, cornered me by the ice sculpture, a smirking, condescending look plastered on his face. "So, Elaine," he began, his voice dripping with false cordiality, "Hannah tells me your little consulting business is keeping you busy." He chuckled, a short, dismissive sound. "That's nice. It's good to have hobbies, isn't it?" I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles tickle my throat before I replied. "It certainly is, Mark. Keeps one occupied." He leaned in, as if sharing a secret. "Between you and me," he whispered, "I always worried about you after, well, you know." He gestured vaguely, a clear reference to my supposed breakdown after Hannah and his wedding 2 years ago. Hannah was so concerned. We all were. "Glad to see you found something to fill the time." "It's more than just filling the time, Mark," I said, keeping my voice even. "Morgan Strategies is doing quite well. Actually," he raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh really? Doing what?" "Exactly." I smiled faintly. "A little bit of everything," I demurred. "Mergers, acquisitions, strategic planning." His smirk widened. "Sounds ambitious for a small-town consultant." I simply smiled again, offering no further explanation. He patted my arm condescendingly. "Well, good for you, Elaine. Just remember, Hannah and I are always here if you need anything, you know. Any real financial advice." He winked, a gesture that made my stomach clench. "We wouldn't want you getting in over your head." "How thoughtful of you, Mark," I replied, my voice still smooth. "I'll keep that in mind." He drifted off then, rejoining the throng of guests, probably eager to share the amusing anecdote of my little hobby with anyone who would listen. I watched him go, the smile on my face slowly fading into something colder. He had no idea. None of them did. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, I found Hannah near the dessert table, picking at a macaron. "Enjoying yourself, darling?" I asked. She hummed vaguely, her eyes fixed on the tiny pastry. "It's fine. A bit over the top, if you ask me." I chuckled softly. "Well, you know your father always liked to make a statement." She shrugged. "Speaking of statements," she said, turning to me, "Mark told me you're doing something with business now." I nodded. "Morgan Strategies. It's going quite well." She frowned slightly. "That's good. Just be careful, Mom. Don't overextend yourself. You know how things were." I reached out and touched her arm. "Don't worry about me, Hannah. I know what I'm doing." Her frown deepened. "I hope so." Mark was saying it sounded like one of your she trailed off, unable to bring herself to say the word episodes. I met her gaze steadily. It's not, Hannah. This is different. She didn't look convinced. Just promise me you'll be careful with money. You know Dad left us well. Not a lot. Your father, I corrected gently, left us more than enough. I've merely grown it. She looked at me with a puzzled expression. Grown it? How? I simply smiled. It's a long story, darling. Perhaps we can chat later. Just then, a waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. More champagne? Mrs. Morgan, he asked, addressing me. I accepted a glass. Thank you. Hannah eyed me curiously. Mrs. Morgan, she repeated. Why is he calling you that? I took a sip of champagne, savoring the crisp, bubbly taste. It's my name, darling, I said, my voice soft. Elaine Morgan, CEO of Morgan Strategies. The confusion on her face was almost comical. CEO, she stammered. Indeed, I replied, setting down my glass. Perhaps you haven't heard. Morgan Strategies just acquired Westbrook Holdings. Hannah's eyes widened. Westbrook Holdings was one of the largest corporations in the state, a company Mark had been desperately trying to court for a lucrative partnership. Acquired Westbrook, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. It seemed like a sound investment. The color drained from Hannah's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I placed a hand on her arm, my expression softening slightly. Don't worry, darling, I said, echoing Mark's earlier words. I'm sure there's room for everyone at the table. I leaned in close, lowering my voice so only she could hear, especially now that I own the table. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving my daughter standing there, speechless, amidst the fading remnants of her extravagant wedding reception. The champagne flutes still clinked faintly in the background, but now the sound seemed less hollow, more like the gentle ringing of victory bells. The champagne flute felt cold in my hand, the bubbles tickling my nose, a stark contrast to the burning humiliation that still simmered beneath my skin. Enjoying the wedding, Elaine, Mark's boss, Richard Hale, a man whose name I'd only heard whispered with a mix of awe and fear, stood beside me, a knowing smile playing on his lips. It's certainly something, I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. Hannah looks radiant. He paused, his eyes flickering towards where my daughter and her new husband were twirling on the dance floor. Mark's a lucky man. Yes, I agreed, taking a slow sip of champagne, the bubbles suddenly tasting flat. He certainly is. Richard turned his attention back to me, his gaze sharp and assessing. You know, Elaine, I've been meaning to talk to you. My heart skipped a beat. Could he have heard the whispers, the snickers, the cruel jokes Hannah had made at my expense, reducing my dreams to a punchline? He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Morgan Strategies. Impressive portfolio. My breath hitched. How did he know? My company, meticulously built brick by brick in the wake of my daughter's dismissal, was supposed to be my secret, my shield, my triumph. Mr. Hale, I stammered, searching for an explanation, a denial, anything to deflect the sudden spotlight. He raised a hand, stopping my flustered attempt at a response. No need for formalities, Elaine. Off the record, of course. He winked, a gesture that seemed oddly out of place on his stern face. I've been following your work for months. Brilliant acquisitions. Strategic brilliance. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat finally dissolving. Thank you, I managed, the words feeling small and inadequate compared to the wave of emotion washing over me. Relief, validation, a flicker of something that felt dangerously close to pride. The Blackwood deal, he continued, his voice laced with a touch of professional admiration. Masterstroke. I've been trying to acquire Blackwood Industries for years. I allowed myself a small smile. They were undervalued. I explained, the words flowing easily now, the confidence I'd carefully cultivated in the solitude of my office finally finding its voice. Their core business, while seemingly outdated, held the key to a burgeoning market. I saw the potential where others saw only decline. Richard nodded, his eyes gleaming with respect. Exactly. Vision. That's what separates the good from the great. He paused, taking a sip of his own drink. Mark tells me you single quotes Ray. Retired. My smile faltered. Retired. The word felt like a slap, a reminder of how Hannah and Mark saw me, a washed-up, irrelevant has-been. I corrected, my voice regaining its steel. I am re-engaged. He chuckled again, this time with genuine amusement. Re-engaged. I like that. Tell you what, Elaine. He leaned in conspiratorially. Once the dust settles on this celebration, he gestured vaguely towards the dance floor. Give me a call. I have a proposition for you, one I think you'll find intriguing. My heart pounded in my chest. Richard Hale, a titan of industry, wanted to work with me. Me, the woman whose own daughter had deemed a laughingstock. I promised, meeting his gaze directly. The champagne suddenly tasted effervescent again. The music, once a grating reminder of my exclusion, now seemed to swell with a triumphant undercurrent. He excused himself then, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, the echoes of his words ringing in my ears. I watched as he approached Hannah and Mark, clapping Mark on the back and whispering something in his ear. Mark's face paled. He looked over at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. I raised my glass in a silent toast. The game, it seemed, had just begun. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me pegged. They thought my story was over. But they were wrong. So very wrong. My story, my real story, was just beginning, and it was going to be a bestseller.